We're now in the second half of TVC Breakfast, this Thursday edition, and we have another discussion to address. Tuesday's Senate meeting took a different turn as the Chief Whip, Ali Ndume, stormed out of the chamber after he was ruled out of order by the President of the Senate, Godswill Akpabio. Senator Ndume had raised a point of order to draw attention of the Senate President to his handling of affairs in the chambers, which he said were against the Senate rules. But Senator Akpabio, the Senate President, had hardly allowed Mr. Ndume to end his speech when he ruled him out of order, which caused the latter to walk out, causing an uproar among the senators. And after a meeting with President Bola Tinubu on Wednesday, the Senate President emphasizes the unity and maturity of the Nigerian Senate, even amidst disagreement. He says, and I quote, "Even if some people disagree on some of the happenings in the Senate, still it's only the majority decision that's going to prevail, and the parliament is like that," end quote. So you're welcome. That's what we'll be discussing in the studio right now. We bring in a public affairs analyst, Daniel Akinlami. It's good to see you again, Mr. Akinlami, on the program.
Thank you for having me.
So, like you heard, the Senate President met with President Bola Tinubu on Wednesday and addressing State House correspondents who understandably asked him about the uproar between him and his colleague, Senator Ali Ndume. He said he waved it aside. Even Ali Ndume too also said he waved it aside. He also waved the exchange aside, saying he didn't walk out, but told his colleagues he was going to pray, because it had, it was time for him to go onto the mosque to pray. But what do you make of, this twist? Is this something you will also wave aside?
Well, I think the Senate President knows the right thing to do, to douse the tension and reckon with the senators that are having the running battle with him. And if we put the issue into context, Ali Ndume is not the only person that's been raising this point of order in the past 2-3 weeks. And this issue has been going on the ground for a while before it came to the drama on Tuesday. Also, last week, there was a similar incident. Last week, Thursday, Senator Ali Ndume raised a point of order similar to what he did 2 days ago. And last week, I think the core of the issue was that some senators felt the Senate President was not carrying them along in the passage of some bills. Like they are shut out from contribution. And in the same manner, another senator, a PDP senator from Nasarawa State, Senator, I think the Poshi also, a similar order. Yes, point of order. Similar to what Senator Ndime did on Tuesday, standing on Order 51 of the Senate standing rules, in order to call the attention of the Senate President to some procedural errors. And the key issue here is the fact that these senators are actually saying that the Senate leadership is not following some procedures. In the words of the PDP senator last week, he was actually even referring to some bills that are passed, like cooking and making those bills become law within 2 hours. So this is the fallout of that happened on Tuesday, when the Senate Chief Whip was referencing a motion moved by the NNPP senator from Kano. The motion was about the reopening of Nigeria-Niger border. And what happened was that the Senate President allow that motion to go to debate without first, officially making it to be announced for reading on the floor. And Idume raised the point of order to call the attention of the Senate president. Obviously, you could see that the tension was already building before that day. And the Senate president has had enough. So that's why it looks like he shut him down on that day. Because last week, he acknowledged the point of order. He even gave a verbal word of being noted to what the PDP senator raised. So, but I think the key issue to take out of the whole thing is the fact that there are some concerns in the business of legislation in the National Assembly right now. And we cannot rule out some of the things that Senator Idume and his colleagues are talking about. They also have valid reasons to challenge the Senate president. There are standards and there are procedures for which business of the Senate are being done. So, but if they are being violated or the leadership is not following what the standard ought to be, I believe they have some reasons to challenge it. But at the end of everything, I believe the leadership of the Senate should do the needful. They should listen to them and also find a way to make an amicable solution.
But then, one of the questions begging for answer is the fact that Senator Ali Ndume was Akpabio's campaign manager during the race for the Senate presidency in June. So a layman question would be, what kind of trailer had gone in between them?
Well, there is nothing much to be surprised for. Senator Ali Ndume is a stakeholder in Nigerian Senate. He's a power broker. He has always been around now for almost 5.
Yes, at least.
Yes,
the
5-time
senator.
So you cannot rule it out. He's very influential. He was the chairman of the Akpabio's campaign when he was elected as the Senate president. And also don't forget that this same Ndume had issue with some past Senate presidents, including Saraki. Even had issue with Ahmed. I remember that of Saraki during the 2017 budget debate. They had disagreement. So he's been there. And he's not somebody that you can push aside. He's highly influential. So that's why I believe that Akpabio has all within his own space and his own power to reach out to them and make sure that the right things are done within the Senate.
And if it is not managed, what do you foresee would happen? What ugly scenarios, or you could even extend the question to say, how will this impact on the business of the Senate, of this
Well, I think we should not be in a hurry to start going to that direction.
No, but it is true.
Yes.
It is true.
Yes.
I think the question is, is legitimate. As
yes.
It's normal for us to disagree.
Yes.
But, on the platform, a national platform as the Senate, one would expect that, healthy exchanges are also permitted. But if not well managed, especially in his position, Akpabio's position as the president of the Senate, what do you think? Why do you think they need to settle this?
I know that's quite the fear of many, that a senator of Ndume's status. So having an issue with the Senate president will give everybody concern. And also, prior to this incident, there have been speculations, unproven speculations, that some senators have grievances with the Senate president. First, some of the issues are fallout from the committee chairman appointments. Some were targeting some juicy committees and they didn't get them. And then there's also the fallout from the election of the Senate president.
Himself, right?
Yes. So I think the Senate president needs to tread with caution as well. So these rumors have been swirling around for a while, and they just look like speculation, but sometimes they build up and become an issue. So his position as Senate president may be threatened if these issues are not addressed as quick as possible. And also, you can look at it that if you have a team of people who back you up to put you in a position and you are beginning to lose them one by one, then you should be worried. And you know, the business of the National Assembly is not a business of maybe a Superman or Iron Man, one man having his way. A democracy on its own, and the business of legislation is give and take. You must have the majority on your side to achieve most of the things you need to achieve in the National Assembly. So it's important for him to listen to his colleagues. And I believe that what they are actually fighting for is valid. It's very, very valid. There are standards. There are rules that guide the business of legislation. You know, making legislation is not a joke. That you cook a bill, you know, roast it and pass it to law within 2 hours. Oh, no, no. So making legislation, you have to be meticulous. You have to be precise. You have to be intentional. And what they were saying is that they were not given the opportunity to contribute to these bills. The bills are being passed hastily. Like what the senator from Nasarawa State said. He said there's even a bill that has to do with monetary policy and was rushed at the floor. So these are things that affect the lives of Nigerians, perhaps affect the economy, affect the interests of the nation. So there are businesses that everybody that has interest should pull their voice.
Mr. Akinlami, let's put you on hold. Apologies for that, but we must take a needed break at this point now, and then we'll return on TVC Breakfast. Please stay with us. Thank you very much for staying with us on TVC Breakfast. And we've been speaking with Taiwo Akinlami here with us in the studio to talk. Daniel Akinlami, I should say, with us. Apologies, Mr. Daniel Akinlami, a public affairs analyst. And we've been looking at the brouhaha recorded in the Senate earlier in the week between the Senate President Godswill Akpabio and the Senator Ali Ndume, who is the chief whip. You know, both men from the governing party, that's the the All Progressives Congress, and of course we've been trying to look at all the issues involved, how both men or how the Senate can generally move forward amidst this rancors. Of course, you've established that it's normal for people to have differences in opinions, but where the Senate is concerned, looking at the rules that govern the Senate is also important to know that these rules are also adhered to in the collective interest of not just the senators, but everyone. Ibrahim.
Absolutely. You know, before now, just like you also alluded to, tension had been building up, before the resumption, their long break, in September. And Senator Elisha Abo, who was, removed by the court, on Monday, appeal court on Monday, issued a statement on behalf of the powerful northern senators, that Senator Akpabio was behind his removal by the court, right, even though he was forced to, eat up his words and saying that he was not responsible. But could that be a backlash from the side of the Senate president against those who didn't support him, or those who are also planning to impeach him? Could that be? Do you think that way?
Well, obviously, it looks like a backlash, a fallout from the election for the office of the president. And but I think it can be an isolated instance for now. We don't necessarily need to connect it to the struggle for forcing Akpabio to follow the procedure on the floor of the Senate. But Elijah Abo was one of the ally of Akpabio's rival for the Senate presidency.
That's right.
And since the other man from Zamfara lost the seat to Akpabio, I know that most of the people on his own side too have suffered in one way or the other. And I noticed that Akpabio tried at some point to carry some of them along. But it depends on how satisfied are they with some of the positions that they were given in the committees and even the responsibility given to them at the floor. But I know that the battle has not ended. And if you notice, recently there was an amendment to the requirement to be the Senate president, and which was very sudden and surprising. And some people alluded that that amendment to the Senate rule about an experienced senator only being allowed to run for the office of the president was targeted at the other man, Yari. So, but I think with all the issues building up before now, Elijah Abo's case may just be his own personal, yes, his own personal issue with the Senate president. And yes, he made a press conference trying to rally his own caucus in the north about the whole issue, but it looks like it's his own personal issue, and which he eventually even apologized for. So, but the core issue now is the fact that when these grievances are going untreated, unaddressed, you see some power brokers in the National Assembly moving against the leadership. It could either be in the Senate or in the House of Rep. Right. But you don't see it coming. That's the issue. You don't see it coming. People will be having natural meetings. People will be pursuing the agenda quietly. So, but if you don't reach out to people to make peace, we've seen several Senate presidents removed. It's just of recent that we have that stability in the Senate.
But I think sometimes, we know the National Assembly is a drama.
Exactly. Just remember the days of Shuka or Kadibo,
exactly.
Evans, Warem, and many of them like that.
So you're expected to see drama. Sometimes it's boring when you watch it live and you didn't see drama. So, don't you feel maybe it's just one of the, because according to the Senate president, he said, we agree to disagree. And so Senate is not boiling. Exactly. So could it just be one of the, characters of what we know the National Assembly to be?
Well, the way the Senate president handles this will determine if it's just one of those issues that will generally comes up. So, but if he does not address some of this aggravation, noting that some of his key men are actually among the people confronting him now. So the drama that happened on Tuesday was unnecessary. The same point of order was raised by Ndume and the other PDP senator from Nasarawa State last week Thursday, and the Senate president acknowledged them. Where he was
told history will judge you.
Yes, exactly. But it seems like he could not have any more of it, and he's tired of their own tantrum and all those things, and he couldn't stand them, raising that point of order over and over at every session of the Senate. So maybe perhaps that's the reason why he shut them down 2 days ago. But I believe he needs to reach out to them because on their own rights, they have valid reasons to correct him, to follow the procedure and the standard rules of the Senate. Those rules were not created for fun. They were created to guide the business of legislation so that the legislation that is being made will have integrity. And the works are done meticulously, and majority will agree that we've all contributed to making this law.
Do you expect some form of intervention, from the president? Of course, Godswill Akpabio made the news. When journalists thronged him, he's coming to the presidential villa to see the president. Naturally got tongues wagging, and he was questioned on the purpose of his visit, where he said there's an upcoming, the first retreat for this particular assembly, and then he was also traveling for an African parley of parliamentarians. But in all of this, because after all, you could say these are the president's, lieutenants, so to speak, because they are from his party. Do you expect some form of intervention from the president, especially when you look at whether it could make or mar his presidency somewhat?
Well, objectively, I don't think the situation has reached that point. And also, it's not every business of the National Assembly the executive can wade in. So these are just the business of legislation. If you are made a Senate president and different forces and caucuses back you up, you also have the responsibility to respect whatever agreement or promises you've made to those individuals that supported you to make you the Senate president. And also, the business of legislation is the business of majority have the votes. So there's no way you can preside over the Senate without carrying the key principalities in the Senate along.
Principal officers.
Yes, yes, principal officers and principalities.
That's another
yes.
way of putting
yes.
it.
Ali Ndume actually is one of those principalities today.
As a chief whip.
Yes, even as a chief whip. So, you know, his responsibility in the party as a chief whip.
Right.
He disseminates information, rally the party members in the Senate, and also coordinate the APC senators in the Senate. So he with so much power. So it's not even somebody that was the chairman of your campaign that you should be fighting with openly. So I think Akpabio should do the needful, reach out to these guys. Like they said, there is no one that is above correction. And the issues are procedural errors. It should resort to the procedure of the Senate. If you are approving a motion, let it be tabled for reading first. Let all the senators that are interested contribute. Let them make their research. Let them look at the pros and the cons of the bills. And yes, I know that I personally do not support the fact that the National Assembly sometimes sit on some certain bills for months or even years, and they dilly-dally and drag some bills. But the same manner, I do not agree to we cooking and roasting beans and passing it to law within 2 hours. So yes, there are standard
That's right.
period for doing a thorough job on any legislation.
So how would you, sorry to butt in, how would you appraise the National Assembly so far, you know, since this administration? The fact that Senator Akpabio saw that this thing was going to degenerate, it quickly, called for, closed door meeting, yes. For further discussion. Could it be that they've resolved it and, for Senator Ndume to also come out to say what he said, and Senator Elisha Abu to also, retract the statement we said earlier? Could it be that they've resolved it amicably?
And the interesting thing about the Senate business in particular, they are always done behind closed doors.
It's like husband and wife.
So right now, we can't really say if they resolve it or they are still having the confrontation going quietly. But what happened in the next couple of weeks will determine if everything now is back to normal.
Right, and this is something that you will also encourage, even across divides, not just in the National Assembly, but even meetings between the president and his ministers. Mr. President, you may need to tweak this way.
And also, based on what he was raising, how do we rate the performance of this
of the ministers,
Senate, or even the National Assembly
and the lawmakers?
Yeah, I think there's nothing really extraordinary so far. Maybe we can still give them benefit of doubt to see how their 6 months will look like. But so far, there's nothing extraordinary. And then we've been having issues of allocation for expensive cars and all those things, also casting aspersion on some of their work that they're supposed to be doing. But there's nothing extraordinary so far with this National Assembly.
All right, time will indeed tell. Permit me to use that saying. And of course, like I said earlier on, there is an upcoming retreat for the members of the 10th Senate. And so they will still continue to be in the spotlight in terms of their written. Daniel Akinlami, public affairs analyst, we thank you very much for speaking with us on TVC Breakfast.
Thank you, it's my pleasure.